Hi. As he said, I'm Max Kaiser, and I'm here to talk about the history of jazz. What exactly will I talk about? Well, I will talk about jazz starting at the origins and going to bebop, and that includes blues and ragtime and Dixieland, swing, and bebop, and some of the jazz chords. What is jazz according to high schoolers? Well, in my jazz band, we all sat in a circle, and the teacher asked, "What is jazz to you?" And this is what they said. Jazz is music, real, hard, improvisation, dissonant, relaxation, fun, smooth, expression, Dixieland, funky, swing, a soul feeling, offbeat, and chord progressions. The origins of jazz. Jazz started in New Orleans with the slaves/Creole and the French. The slaves added the rhythm to jazz, and the French added the chords and harmonies and the form of jazz. Blues was the very first kind of jazz, started in the 1890s, along with the origins of jazz, and it took the form we commonly know in 1910. It has 12 bars in an AAB lyrical style, meaning that the first two lines rhyme and the third line doesn't, and it has a special scale in which the third and fifths are flat, or the third and seventh are flatted. So normal scale sounds like this. Except with blues, you flat the third and seventh, so it sounds like this. And there are three kinds of blues: classic, country, and urban. First off, that I'll talk about is country, which is folk-like, and it has vocals plus one instrument, and it was almost always a male singer, and the lyrics tell a story. And it sounded like this. After country came classic. And classic was more urban-oriented than country, and the structure was more formalized, and there were both male and female singers. And it sounded like this. Here. And then there was also urban, which was basically like classic, except there was more saxophone in it. And it sounded like this. And then after blues, and kind of during it, came ragtime, which was popular from 1897 to 1917. There were three key figures in it: Scott Joplin, James Scott, and Joseph Lamb. And characteristics of it were a steady beaten bass, like this. And it sounded similar to a march. I mean, you could hear it from that bass line. It had syncopated melodies. It just had simple harmonies, no complex chords like blues. And it was duple music, meaning that the time signature was 2 or a multiple of 2, which supported the steady beat in the bass. Like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is a multiple of 2. And ragtime sounded like this. After ragtime came Dixieland, which began in 1917, right after ragtime ended. And it was a marriage of blues and ragtime. So it kept the steady beat in the bass and the syncopated melodies from ragtime, but it had the complex chords of blues. So it was like a bluesy ragtime. And it was the first recorded jazz by the original Dixieland Jazz Band, as they called themselves. Whether or not that's true, nobody knows. And common instruments in it were the trumpet cornet, the clarinet, and the trombone. The rhythm section included the banjo, the piano, the drums, and the string bass or tuba. And I would normally play a recording here, but the computer doesn't have audio, so the recording was by Jelly Roll Morton, who was one of the best Dixieland players ever. But Dixieland is very hard, so I'm not able to play it. So that's why I had the recording, but I can't play that. After Dixieland came swing, which was from the late 1920s to around 1945. Swing was in a big band setting, and there were a couple of rhythm section changes. The banjo became the guitar, the tuba became the bass, and the bass line became walking. So instead of it was now, there were two kinds of swing, improvisation bands and dance bands. Improv was, improv, playing what you feel like, which wasn't very good for dancing to. And dance bands played the same melody over and over again, which was really good for dancing to. And a really big figure in swing was Count Basie and his swingin' jazz band. And this is what swing sounded like. After swing came bebop, which we're not really sure right when bebop started to become popular. We'll just say by 1945. The earliest recording of it was 1941, but nobody really knows because records were very scarce in that time period because of World War II. All of the materials for records were going to the war, and nobody really knows. Bebop had dissonance instead of consonants. Consonants, happy chord. Dissonance is unhappy chord, like this. And bebop had no specific form to it, unlike songs before it. And there were two kinds of bebop, hard bop and cool school. Hard bop was on the East Coast, and it was called funky jazz. And a big name in it was Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. And it sounded like this. And also was cool school, another kind of bebop, which was more centered around the West Coast, and it was smoother and more laid back than hard bop, and it liked harmony more than rhythm, so it had more complex chords, making it harder to play, and it was slower. And a giant name in cool school was Miles Davis, and it sounded like this. So in conclusion, I have enlightened you about jazz from its conception in the early 1890s to the bebop era in the 1950s, which included the following: the origins of jazz, blues, ragtime, Dixieland, swing, and bebop, and some of the chords in jazz. The end. I hope you learned a little more than you knew before about the best genre in the history of music. Any questions? I play the piano for jazz band. That's why I'm playing it now. I got a lot of it from my jazz band teacher. Some of it's off the web. Oh man, that's hard to determine. It's probably Dixieland because I like the steady beat in the bass, but I also like the chords from blues, so Dixieland's perfect. Any more? Okay, thank you.